I'm Michael Bain, and welcome to Triggered, brought to you by Midway USA. Just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors. And by the way, thanks for the hat, Larry. Today we're going to continue on a theme we've been talking about that is basically because of the times. Because of the times, sometimes we need to carry a gun that is in a less obtrusive situation. Sometimes you may not want to carry a gun in a long gun bag that says, "I'm a gun." So I looked in the safe, and about 4 or 5 years ago, I put together a project that the basis was a gun was legal in every state in the union. It's a gun that didn't break any laws. And here's what I came up with. This is a Browning BLR, Browning lever action rifle in .223, exactly the same as an AR. Now I'm going to unpack this bag and talk you a little bit through this rifle, but it was an interesting project. And a lot of it was based on lever action rifles are very, very rarely seen as anything that somebody desperately wants to ban. So that makes them useful in a lot of the slave states that you're going to see in the Northeast or the Northwest or California. So I got a BLR in .223. And then I said, gosh, what do I need to change? But first, let me take you through a little bit of the gun. One of the interesting things about the BLR is it's fed by a magazine. This is a 5-shot .223 magazine. In an ideal world, somebody would be making an extended magazine for this rifle. And in fact, somebody is in Australia. And try though I might, I couldn't figure out a way to get that magazine from Oz to here. But what drew me to a magazine rifle is that gives you full latitude of the kind of rounds that you put in here. Little pointy rounds, you know, boat tail rounds, things like that. It was the same thinking that John Browning used in creating the 1895. When you go to high pressure cartridges, there's a lot of things that have to change on the gun. But as ammunition became better and better and there became more and more choices, the lever gun fell behind because it required flat-nosed ammunition, which meant that you couldn't really get the kind of ballistic advantages that you were getting with other rounds. So I wanted a lever action gun that came with a magazine. To the best of my knowledge, there's only two with a detachable magazine, the Henry Long Ranger and the Browning BLR. You can say the 1895 has a magazine, but it doesn't come out and you have to load it from the top. So I wanted .223 because back in the day, like, I don't know, a year ago, you could buy .223 for kibbles and bits at the 7-Eleven. Or maybe not the 7-Eleven, but any hardware store carried .223. It was an easy cartridge. And I wanted the BLR because it is, in effect, a lever gun tank. This gun is a tank. It is built for the pressures of modern day cartridges. And it's available. Wow, I checked just before I came to the studio. Right now, the Browning lever action rifle takedown, which is this version, is available in 15 different calibers, all the way up to 7 rim mag and 300 Winchester Magnum. Those are a heck of a cartridges, by the way. And it's been in production since 1960. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the second segment. But what's interesting about this gun is, as I said, it's built for the ground up for high pressure cartridges. Now, if you look at this bolt, you know, much beefier bolt, and you see the gears on the bottom, or maybe it's easier to see them if I close it, and you look through the magazine well there, and you can actually see gears. And that's because instead of like a toggle linkage that you might see in other lever action rifles, this one runs on gearing. So it is very specific. The mechanical advantage is very good. You also notice something else about this rifle. You notice that the trigger comes with it. Now, what's ironic is Browning said that's to keep you from sticking your finger in a trigger of a lever action gun, which I've never done, except on an 1887 Winchester shotgun. But in any case, this gun is overbuilt. And to me, it has one of the most thoughtful takedown systems I'd seen. You don't have to dance. You don't have to unscrew anything. The entire thing you have to do to put this thing back together is like, whoop, work the lever. This goes in there. That goes there. This goes there. And you're done. It is a very quick gun and a very sturdy gun. The system that holds this gun together could probably hold a tank up in the air. So I made a few changes here, and just to touch on a couple of them, I elected to go with a forward mount scope. This is a Burris 275, 2 3/4 scout scope, although I'm considering going to a variable, a 2 to 7, 1.5 to 5, whatever. But I had this rail, I put this rail on and set the scope up to be very, very quick. I wanted the scope to sit really close to the bore because I want this to be a rifle that's easy to use with both eyes open. A couple other things I did, and we're going to get into them second segment. Stay with us.
The revolutionary TCM from Rock Island Armory. Fire it once and you'll be hooked. The first thing you'll notice is its sonic boom and enormous muzzle flash as it hurls the exclusive Armscore 22 TCM round downrange at a blistering 2,000 feet per second with penetrating impact. It shoots surprisingly easy with light recoil. The 17-round TCM series, so fun to shoot, it's like a thrill ride, only better.
Welcome back to Triggered, brought to you by Midway USA. And by the way, this void in the middle of January, where the SHOT Show used to be, is typically when optics companies release their newest products. That's happening across the board. As a consequence, go to Midway and look at optics, because last year's optics, which I told you were the best in the world, are now on sale for about half price. Look at the Bushnells. Let me tell you a little bit about the BLR and why I think it's kind of an exceptional gun. I'm in the process of writing a book on the modern lever action rifle because I find it completely fascinating. There's numerous books on the history, the founding, Oliver Winchester, Monsieur Smith, and Wesson, and how we came up with the gun that won the West. But what struck me as interesting as we move into the 1970s, 1960s, there was a movement to modernize the lever action rifle. And you can see it in the Browning, the Savage 99s, which are very successful rifles, were in their own right. You can also see it in some of the lever action guns that Ruger made. A couple of Winchesters were made very modern. And the problem was the market wasn't necessarily looking for a modern lever action rifle. Yeah, you could make a case it wasn't looking for a lever action rifle at all. When you come after World War I and the rise of the bolt actions, the lever action rifle got really pushed to the side, even the great Winchester 94. So you saw modern, sleek lever action rifles, and they all passed away. Essentially, nobody bought them, and they were eventually discontinued. The market wants a lever action rifle that looks like a Western lever action rifle. And this one does, even though the insides are completely different, absolutely different. And by the way, if you want to take it apart to see how the insides are different, do not call me when you can't put it back together, because nobody but a Browning armorer can put it back together. But the BLR came in, late 60s, probably 1970, first went on sale. And not a gigantic super hit, but a solid seller over the years. Originally a steel frame, it went to aluminum frame, I think in 1996. The takedown model came. One of the things I had to do with this is it's a little porky when you buy it. And generally the essentially hunting market doesn't care. If it's running 8-9 pounds, they're pretty good with it. I wanted a really light gun because I wanted to be able to take it with me. So I went to MPI, who make custom fiberglass stocks, and I had them make me this stock. It is 2 pounds lighter than the laminated stock that this gun came with. And 2 pounds is a pretty big chunk. I wish I could get a trigger job. Because of what I just told you about taking this gun apart, well, most gunsmiths, if you actually bring them a Browning lever action and say, I'd like a trigger job, they will throw a silver cross up and scream, "Be gone, demon," because they don't want to mess with it either. I think there's one or two gunsmiths that specialize in this. But what I found, the more you work this gun, the better the trigger settles in. And it helps that it's got a pretty wide, flat trigger here. So this is the modern lever gun that survived. I can tell you a couple of things that I did wrong. When I went to the Scout scope, I did not make provisions for a backup iron sight. I could have probably gone with a slightly higher mount on this scope and then been able to mount a sight right in there. It's not a pick rail, it's a weaver rail, so you have to kind of dance around the lack of slots. Had I chosen, I could put a regular scope on this rifle. It is drilled and tapped. Because it's an aluminum receiver, if you look close, you can see that it has steel inserts for the threads. Why didn't I do that? Well, when the scope is on the barrel, when you put it back in, it will retain its zero. Now when the scope is mounted here on the frame and you take the barrel off, you put it back on, you're going to have to go check that zero because it might well shift. It usually doesn't, but usually is one of those words that can really hang you up if you're traveling with this gun. As I said in the first segment, 2 3/4 power scope doesn't give me everything this gun will do. I will tell you the truth, this is not a tack driver, this is a 1.5, 2 MOA gun. That's fine. It would be fine for hunting. I've never really tailored ammunition for it. Typically when I've carried it on the road, I use Hornady taps, and they gave me about, well, MOA.5, MOA.75. But I really feel like if I sorted ammo, which people used to do in the old days, did you know that? People would actually go to the store and buy 4 or 5 brands of ammo and try it and see which one worked best. God, man, for those of you who are really old, that's something you're going to tell your kids. Remember when I went to the hardware store and bought 4 different kinds of 223? Wee doggy. Anyway, if I tailored ammunition for this, and let's say I went to the Burris, the 2 to 7X or 1.5 to 4X, 1.5 to 5 Leopolds, any of those variable optics, I think this becomes a 300 to 400 yard rifle. As it sits right now, I'm perfectly comfortable with it at 250, somewhere in that range. So only other thing I did that people make fun of me for doing is I put a piece of leather on the lever. And that's because I like my fingers, and when you run the gun, you're going to hit the bottom of that lever and it's going to hurt. So this is a gun I built. I've been pretty proud of it. And one other drawback, just let me mention it before we go out to commercial, the magazines are ridiculously expensive. That's a $70 magazine. Good grief. Make it in plastic, charge me 15 bucks. We have lots more Triggered brought to you by Midway USA when we come back.
This week's Triggered is brought to you by Midway USA. Just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors. Taurus USA, designed to protect. Volquartsen, engineering the world's finest rimfire rifles, pistols, and parts. And Franklin Armory, making some of the most innovative guns in America.
Welcome back to Triggered, brought to you by Midway USA. And this is a new gun of mine. This is a Henry X model in 410. You'll notice it has synthetic stock, polymer stocks. All Henrys now have this loading gate. And we'll talk about why that's important in just a minute. But I bought this gun specifically for my book on lever actions because I am including a chapter on shotguns. You're probably familiar with Browning's, John Browning's 1887 shotgun, a lever gun that was originally in 10 gauge black powder. And then later on, Winchester, Marlin, several people did 410 lever action shotguns. They were essentially, as we've talked a little bit earlier about the Henry 22 smoothbore, they were garden guns. You know, they were rabbit guns. They were quail guns close in. But I bought this gun because I think it's a fascinating idea and cartridge to do this. Henry went to this Model X because you're starting to see tactical lever guns, which I'll be talking about in the book, essentially where they're able to attach things to them. And of course, this Henry synthetic stock has a pick rail right here. So you can, in fact, attach a light, a laser, an aquarium bubbler, a coffee maker, whatever you want to hang on the gun. It is also drilled and tapped, so it can take a rail on top or a scope or a fixed red dot sight, which is probably what I'll do with it, honestly. I put a red dot sight here. Otherwise, it's got a fiber optic bead in the front. It's a 6-shot gun, weighs about 7.5 pounds. As I said, in 410. Now this is where it gets funny. I got this gun. I had to wait like 2 weeks for the NICS check to clear in Colorado, whatever. But I said, okay, 410. I must have a ton of 410. So I spent one full day looking for the ton of 410 that I have. And what I discovered is I have a ton of 20 gauge. 410, there it is, folks, right there on the table. 2 buckshot, 4 really old slugs, and a box of 410 Winchester Defender. They're PDX round where it shoots like a little spaceship and some pellets. I saw this box on sale at Gunbroker for $189. It's about a 20-buck box of ammunition. Luckily, I was able to find some other shells for 410. They'll take forever to get here, but I had to decide, if this is all I have in 410, all I got, I had to decide whether I want to shoot some of those for you or I want to trade this pile for a ski chalet in Switzerland. It's a tough choice. We probably will go ahead and fire them off. But once again, this is a gun that has multiple uses. Henry puts it as a hunting gun, fun gun. You can shoot some interesting clays with it. It's got an Invector style screw-in choke. As I said, 6 shots of 410. So I'm going to say, and you know, you're welcome to send me great letters going like, everybody knows 410 don't do nothing. I've shot federal buckshot into ballistic gelatin a number of times. I've also shot federal buckshot at various and sundry ranges. Enough so that I think the federal buckshot load is one heck of a load. The Winchester Defenders are not bad, but the federal buckshot load is one heck of a load. So I think you have like 4 pellet. These are 2.5-inch 410s, by the way, will not run with 3-inch. So let's say you had a 4 pellet, 3 pellet buckshot in a 6-round tube. You know, you kind of got 18 pellets that are going out there. So conceivably, if you wanted a low recoil shotgun for self-defense, I wouldn't go, if you were carrying a 410, I would not go up to you and say, you know, I read on the internet and I heard from at least 5 guys on YouTube that only a crazy man uses a 410 for self-defense, because if you shoot me, it'll be like I have an invisible shield. Nothing will happen. The pellets will go everywhere. No, that doesn't happen. You know, in fact, it's not my first choice for a self-defense gun, but I wouldn't cry and write home to mommy if it's what I was left with, if it's something I had in my hands. You know, let's say I have it out in the field. Let's say I'm using it to hunt the dread rabbit, which my beagle Newt would love. Of course, I would never see her again once she got on the trail. She's not hunting trained. She's noise trained. She is the noisiest thing in the entire universe. But yeah, if I was hunting rabbit, if you're hunting squirrel, you're out there somewhere, and somebody's, you're at your camp at night, you got buckshot loaded in it, okay, you've got something. And one thing I like about this gun, Henry's gone to a loading gate on I think on all their guns by popular demand, because people looked at Henry. Henry didn't have a loading gate. It had this guy here, the forward loading, which is really common on 22s, but it wasn't really, also on 32s, but it was never really common on rifles. And when Henry came out with their rifles, and they did not have the side gate, they just had the front, a lot of people thought, well, that was great, and I didn't care one way or the other. But there was enough controversy that Henry went to loading gates. The advantage of a loading gate is you can reload quickly. I can tell you this, with a 410, it's a lot harder to reload quickly than it might be with a 38 or a 44 Special. It's easier to load from the front end. It's easy to empty the gun. You can just take the cap off, dump the rounds out, rack it a couple of times. So again, 6 rounds, load it with 6, cock 1 in the chamber, and you're good to go. In terms of safety, one of the things I want to just explain to you guys is I believe that a lever action rifle is one of the safest things in the world, because when you put the hammer down there, you can look at it and know what condition it's in. The hammer's down. I've carried lever action rifles in the field. I've carried it with professional hunters. That's something everyone has mentioned to me. So this gun, to me, It's a pretty nice little field gun. If it was takedown, it would fall right into the category of put it in a special bag and take it with you. Next week, more stuff, more new guns. I've got stuff coming in, again, because of the void where the SHOT Show is, but this is Triggered. You can find us on YouTube, you can find us on michaelbain.tv, and when you go to YouTube, hit subscribe, because I want to build up subscribers right up till the point that they deplatform me, which they will. And I will see you next week on michaelbain.tv, regardless of if they deplatform me on those other platforms.